Governor. My home is situated directly in this very community, and that destroyed structure right there used to be where my child attended school. Rachel Dervish, a thoroughly shattered parent whose whole existence had recently been turned into smoldering wreckage, ran wildly and urgently after the heavily shielded official government vehicle carrying Governor Gavin Newsom. Her steps forcefully churned the dense silver soot that formerly comprised the gorgeous, tranquil neighborhood of Pacific Palisades. Reacting directly to her gut-wrenching, frantic pleas for assistance, the influential state leader merely acted as though his cell phone had abruptly and opportunely dropped its connection, and he decisively, callously slammed the thick door of his armored transport all the way closed. The whole viewing nation watched that precise, soul-crushing incident loop endlessly across their TV displays and smart gadgets. Vice President JD Vance also viewed that very same recording. Later, as Vance ultimately took his seat directly facing Newsom inside a sprawling legislative committee chamber precisely 3 months following that horrific disaster, he purposefully avoided starting his fierce questioning with the standard, readily dodged data points like the towering $31 billion budget shortfall, the notorious French Laundry restaurant controversy, or literally any of the typical customary legislative figures the polished governor had become fully habituated to easily justifying. Rather than relying on metrics, he commenced his inquiry using nothing but Rachel's identity. He subsequently and intentionally unsealed a slim paper file holding a strictly confidential liquid utilities report, a damning piece of evidence that Newsom's administrative staff had officially acquired an entire year and a half prior to the local community's water spigots truly running entirely empty. This was a terrifying dispatch, clearly warning that the municipal water tanks were severely inadequate, that the fundamental emergency flow volume sat perilously beneath the strict baseline thresholds, and that blameless citizens would unquestionably perish should the bordering arid mountainsides ever ignite. Those bordering mountainsides undeniably did burst into flames, and the community's emergency spigots undeniably did run totally empty. 29 blameless individuals heartbreakingly lost their lives in the terrifying blaze. Yet during that whole disastrous chain of completely avoidable incidents, that pressing advisory document had merely rested totally unopened inside the state leader's electronic mail system for the whole duration. Be certain to hit that thumbs up icon since you are preparing to witness a vice president originating from the blue-collar community of Middletown, Ohio. Utter precisely a single name, Rachel Dervish, and methodically, utterly destroy a whole executive administration utilizing the exact soot she was abandoned in. Mr. Vice President, I am presently leading 40 million residents amidst the most catastrophic environmental emergency in the whole documented past of Los Angeles. Newsom declared vigorously, trying to exude absolute command. He quickly recited the bleak, ruinous figures. 12,000 distinct buildings utterly wiped out, 29 mortal souls sorrowfully taken, and countless billions in disastrous structural ruin. He vociferously announced his immediate active participation, arguing that he had been literally present at the scene, that he had individually mobilized the National Guard forces, and that he had deeply collaborated with FEMA, CAL FIRE, and literally every single municipal and national crisis department actively functioning today. Following that, he conveyed his deep, haughty outrage over being suddenly dragged away from live emergency coordination simply to face interrogation from an individual who had never individually overseen any emergency greater than the routine administration of a typical senatorial workplace. Gavin Newsom remained seated at the testimony desk, exhibiting the weighted, conquered stance of an individual who had previously only just endured 2 punishing legislative inquisitions, pounded severely by Trump's crude mallet, and cut by Vance's precise blade, having been fundamentally shattered by the 2 meetings while being restored by 0 of them. The renowned diplomatic sheen had completely vanished, and it was decidedly not fixed on this occasion. It was simply absent. His immaculately groomed election hair remained precisely as it always did. His immaculately fitted outfit remained precisely as it always did. However, the mortal visage sitting below them had permanently altered into the expression of a panicked individual who had been suffering at a -5 in countrywide executive surveys for 60 consecutive days, and who had been compelled to observe his formerly bright legislative destiny incinerate alongside the very same crushing powerlessness with which the inhabitants of Pacific Palisades had recently witnessed their domestic residences fiercely combust. With all proper reverence, Mr. Vice President, I am currently battling an inferno. You are simply conducting an inquiry, Newsom parried. Yet the dark truth remained that the official theoretically combating an inferno had, throughout that exact same blaze, purposefully faked a dropped cellular connection merely to dodge, talking to a mourning parent whose child's educational facility had recently incinerated, even as the municipal water outputs intended to defend her community had gone completely empty precisely 18 months following his administration, receiving a report explicitly predicting they would do so. Vice President JD Vance rested completely motionless at the distant edge of the raised timber platform, sporting a deeply serious blazer devoid of any necktie. His slender, meticulously indexed file sat silently on the tabletop directly before him. He had refrained from uttering a lone syllable throughout Newsom's whole extended initial address. His visage bore the unmistakable, resolute look of an extremely ready individual who had painstakingly completed all the necessary study materials. Governor, I wish to commence this session using a single identity, Vance declared distinctly. He purposely refrained from unsealing the file right away, asking, Rachel Dervish, are you aware of precisely who she might be? Vance subsequently went on to detail that Rachel Dervish represents an industrious parent living within Pacific Palisades. She possesses a small child who went to a neighborhood academy situated straight along Marquez Avenue, an institution that Rachel had affectionately chauffeured her toward every single dawn for 3 back-to-back years. Upon the 9th of January, 2025, that gorgeous academy incinerated totally to the earth, while Rachel's whole bordering community fiercely combusted. Her private domestic residence caught fire, and literally everything she had continually constructed within Pacific Palisades, the house, the recognized academic commute, the welcoming peers, her whole existence was transformed into smoldering dust in just 4 brief hours. Vance was decidedly not reciting these poignant facts out of the file, but rather voicing them completely out of his own recollection. He deployed what might be labeled the Middletown tone, that particular rooted vocal style he invariably utilized whenever he was recalling a breathing human being instead of delivering an administrative report. Rachel courageously traveled to the catastrophe zone, into her devastated community, into the smoldering soot, and she discovered, you positioned right there, Governor, Vance recounted. Your sprawling convoy, your broadcasting lenses, your preliminary crew, your intense protection squad. You were nonchalantly strolling directly amidst the wreckage, the terrible wreckage of her community, her avenue, her child's academy, purely for the broadcasts. Vance's vocal tone became fiercely concentrated as he said, she sprinted wildly, trailing your vehicle, urgently crying out, Governor, Governor, I reside right here. Governor, that used to be my child's academy. You callously faked that your device dropped its connection, you shut the thick portal, and you merely departed, which caused Newsom's mandible to instantly clench. This was definitely not the assured election clench. Neither was it the hostile arguing clench. This was the restricted clench of an embarrassed individual who had been compelled to view this precise, shameful footage broadcasted across every solitary broadcasting channel for 3 consecutive months. That clenching did not indicate calmness. It was unadulterated recollection. It represented the biological form, automatically recalling the precise instant, the massive vehicle, the scent of the cinders, the frequency of the female's shout, the noise of the portal shutting. Sky News had captured the whole event, and the rapidly spreading footage had been watched a staggering 60 million times. 60 million individuals had observed a parent sprinting across the cinders of her child's academy, pursuing a state leader who lacked the fundamental mortal grace to halt. Ultimately, Vance unsealed the file, clarifying, "Yet I did not arrive this afternoon to discuss the recorded footage, Governor. I arrived to profoundly investigate the reason those cinders existed there to begin with." He disclosed that the legislative panel had officially secured, via a rigid open documents demand submitted to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, an extremely restricted domestic utility evaluation from June 2023, precisely 18 months prior to the disastrous Palisades blaze. He recited the passage vocally, present holding tank liquid volumes within the Santa Monica Mountain Service Zone are functioning at roughly 62% of their lowest mandatory emergency stream volume during a complex blaze mitigation event incorporating sloped neighborhood sectors. Existing liquid utilities are totally inadequate for sustaining proper spigot force during prolonged crisis protocols lasting beyond 4 hours. While Vance recited the condemning phrasing, Newsom's right palm gradually shifted toward the border of the desk. He was not clutching it, but instead pushing the gradual, relentless flattening of digits upon rigid timber that commences once a mortal form instinctively determines it requires a tangible tether, making the desk the sole firm object accessible, inadequate for sustaining proper spigot force, Vance echoed pointedly, which is precisely what the domestic evaluation clearly stated 18 complete months prior to the municipal outputs going entirely empty, 18 months prior to courageous emergency responders reaching Pacific Palisades, only to discover outputs yielding absolutely zero. Vance fluidly flipped the sheet, declaring, "This crucial evaluation was formally transmitted toward the Governor's Office of Emergency Services upon the 14th of July, 2023. The panel has validated this delivery via domestic electronic mail tracking data, meaning your department undeniably acquired it, Governor, prompting the panel to pose one highly basic query. What exact steps were executed to address this grim evaluation?" He placed the paper back upon the tabletop, noting, "The genuine reply is precisely zero. Zero crisis tank refilling, zero provisional liquid holding implementation, zero utility enhancement approvals, and exactly zero messaging toward municipal blaze squads regarding the critically lowered spigot capabilities. Zero. Throughout 18 lengthy months, the cautionary dispatch merely rested within the executive's electronic network. Consequently, once the brutal Santa Ana gusts ultimately struck, causing the Palisades to fiercely incinerate as panicked emergency responders twisted the spigots only to yield nothing, that exact dispatch remained resting precisely there, totally ignored. Vance subsequently transitioned to investigate a different element concerning the precise date the executive decided to tour the Palisades catastrophe zone. He highlighted that the terrible Rachel Dervish incident did not occur through simple chance, but rather unfolded via intentional itinerary. He extracted another paper, a panel-secured duplicate of the extremely restricted preliminary crew summary generated ahead of Newsom's January 10th tour of the Palisades. Your preliminary crew was clearly advised upon the exact dawn of your tour that unhoused municipal citizens encompassing shattered households who had seen their residences completely destroyed over the prior 24 hours were physically situated around the Marquez Avenue location, Vance recited. This summary paperwork formally pinpointed roughly 15 to 20 unhoused locals situated at that precise spot, while advising, as Vance read verbatim, directing Governor via Eastern approach to optimize broadcasting visibility whilst reducing unplanned engagements. Vance echoed the repulsive wording, reducing unplanned engagements, emphasizing that Newsom's advanced squad was aware Rachel Dervish remained stationed precisely there, not via her precise title, but rather through her generalized classification. Unhoused locals, individuals whose residences had recently fiercely combusted, individuals who could require explanations, individuals who could prove intensely distressed, individuals who could shout. His legislative squad purposefully selected the exact strolling path designed to ensure the flawless broadcast framing, completely absent any challenging mortal dialogue. They opted for the superficial media stunt, meaning Rachel Dervish was not positioned upon the formal itinerary. Rather, she was situated straight into the classification slated for active evasion. Moreover, once she courageously declined to be evaded, sprinting across the smoldering cinders of her child's destroyed academy, approaching his sprawling convoy while urgently shouting, "Governor, I reside right here," he merely grabbed his device, faked a drop connection, and decisively shut the portal of the vehicle. Newsom's pushing digits paled significantly across the joints, creating a biological clutch considerably firmer compared to the initial portion of the session. It proved firmer exactly since this material was not theoretical statistics regarding EDD deception or unhoused expenditures. This constituted agonizing evidence concerning a parent situated amidst cinders being callously classified as an unplanned engagement slated for reduction. Metrics regarding currency merely register as metrics, whereas a mourning female being purposefully reduced registers as a living individual. Governor, reducing unplanned engagements happens to be precisely the phrasing your squad utilized, Vance observed. Within my native community of Middletown, we possess a distinctly alternate term for motoring away from a parent positioned amidst the cinders of her child's academy, which we refer to as abandoning. Vance highlighted that Rachel's academy sat exactly within the region serviced by those inadequate holding tanks, the identical holding tanks remaining at a 62% fullness level. The spigots were unable to sustain liquid force, meaning Rachel's academy totally incinerated due to a lack of adequate liquid. Furthermore, an inadequate amount of liquid existed simply since the dispatch explicitly predicting an inadequate amount of liquid rested totally neglected within the workplace for 18 months while absolutely nobody executed a single action. Vance gazed at Newsom, stating, "Within Middletown, whenever the municipal blaze squad discovers a spigot that fails to operate, they promptly repair it instead of submitting a dispatch and delaying 18 months repairing it, since living individuals actually reside adjacent to spigots, and individuals consistently hold far greater value than administrative protocol." Vance subsequently and methodically challenged the region's blaze financing, declaring, "Governor, you boastfully informed the nation that you incredibly multiplied the blaze financing by 10, expanding from $200 million prior to your swearing in up to a staggering $2 billion presently." This represented Newsom's preferred statistic, plastered across his formal internet domain while being reiterated across every media dispatch. He boasted regarding the tenfold expansion during CNN broadcasts, recited it throughout innumerable media briefings, and visibly displayed it across an internet portal quite literally named California Fire Facts. However, the panel's economic evaluators carefully scrutinized precisely what those staggering $2 billion truly purchased. Vance extracted the comprehensive financial separation, stating $2 billion in cumulative blaze-oriented expenditures was meticulously classified by the panel dollar by dollar, revealing the precise separation. 82%, representing $1.64 billion, flowed exclusively toward blaze mitigation gear, human resources, CAL FIRE personnel, choppers, and vehicles, the massive apparatus devoted to fiercely combating blazes purely once they commence, while 7%, representing $140 million, flowed exclusively toward administrative workspaces, sprawling operational costs, and the broad administration of blaze coordination, leaving a meager 11%, representing $220 million, directed toward genuine blaze deterrence, foliage removal, managed ignitions, and flora administration, the genuine arduous labor that proactively halts blazes prior to them ever commencing. Vance placed the condemning separation upon his tabletop. Governor, out of every solitary dollar you dedicated toward blaze coordination, a meager 11 pennies flowed toward deterrence, meaning 11 pennies toward proactively halting the blaze prior to it hitting Rachel Dervish's child's academy, alongside 82 pennies toward combating it purely once it already strikes. Newsom urgently tilted toward his audio receiver, attempting to interrupt with Mr. Vice President the framing of Cal Fire's financing. Yet Vance decidedly refrained from sustaining his address using the precise, identical, relentless rhythm and the precise, identical, hushed ferocity. Newsom's incomplete phrase, advancing urgently toward the wording, fails to represent the holistic strategy toward wilderness blaze coordination, totally missed its target objective, vanishing into the atmosphere, precisely how every incomplete phrase vanishes throughout this harsh sequence not severed via booming audio, but utterly refused any opening through absolute relentless drive. Vance pressed on, disclosing how the panel additionally scrutinized the procedures regarding managed ignition authorizations. Managed ignitions, otherwise termed scheduled flames, stand universally acknowledged as the absolute most potent blaze deterrence mechanism accessible to mankind. They efficiently diminish gathered deceased combustibles, they establish crucial protectable borders, and they literally represent the distinction separating a trivial blaze that merely scorches ground foliage from a disastrous blaze that incinerates domestic residences. Nevertheless, within the region of California, managed ignitions lawfully mandate extremely complicated authorizations via the California Environmental Quality Act, otherwise CEQA. The panel determined how the standard administrative delay period simply to acquire a managed ignition authorization sits at a torturous 14 months. 14 lengthy months merely to secure formal authorization to remove the arid foliage that requires just 4 brief hours to utterly incinerate a community, Vance stressed. The whole Pacific Palisades sector had lacked a lone managed ignition throughout beyond 7 complete years. This translated to 7 consecutive years featuring massively gathered arid foliage, 7 years featuring hazardous combustibles piling atop the sharp slopes straight over domestic residences, straight over susceptible academies, and straight over Rachel Dervish's peaceful avenue. Consequently, once the brutal Santa Ana gusts predictably struck, hitting 70 miles per hour, completely parched and intensely warm the precise perilous climate that literally every solitary blaze researcher within California fiercely cautions against every single October, the staggering combustible mass remained resting straight there. 7 complete years' worth, merely waiting for ignition, prompting the panel to profoundly investigate the precise authorization record across the Palisades sector. 3 distinct managed ignition requests were filed spanning the years 2019 through 2023, with the initial requests being completely rejected following an intense CEQA judicial dispute launched by an ecological organization referencing the necessity of shielding the environment belonging to the coastal California gnatcatcher. The subsequent request became hopelessly stalled throughout 11 months prior to being eventually pulled by the exasperated filer once the secure ignition period had previously concluded. The third request gained authorization theoretically, yet went totally unexecuted since the ultimate clearance appeared during August, landing completely beyond the secure ignition timeframe. Thus, once the subsequent secure ignition timeframe commenced, the convoluted authorization had lapsed demanding lawful resubmission. 3 distinct efforts spanning 7 lengthy years, resulting in precisely 0 ignitions, rendering the foliage exceptionally parched and perilously thick, Vance declared. 7 complete years' worth of massively gathered combustibles merely rested menacingly upon the slope straight over Rachel Dervish's avenue, precisely akin to a totally armed firearm, simply awaiting an irresponsible spark. Vance subsequently recited destructive statements provided by an experienced CAL FIRE battalion commander, a weathered individual who has combated wilderness blazes within California throughout 23 years. We have been pleading for deterrence financing throughout my entire tenure within the agency, as we understand precisely what succeeds, meaning managed ignitions succeed, foliage removal succeeds, and protectable borders succeed. So we understand precisely how to halt these disastrous blazes, yet we lack the financing to halt blazes, since we solely receive financing to fiercely combat them purely after they possess already begun, and whenever they begin amidst severe climates akin to the Palisades, they literally become impossible to combat, meaning they must merely be outlasted. Vance gazed upward, stating, "He noted they must merely be outlasted, Governor, meaning the exact individuals you boastfully compensate to combat blazes are explicitly informing you how they definitely cannot combat the staggering blazes you remain utterly neglecting to halt, while they urgently request a mere 11 extra pennies per dollar, only to be continually informed how the sweeping ecological evaluation protocol, a protocol crafted exclusively for defending wilderness, shall lawfully prohibit them from removing the exact foliage that ultimately murders blameless individuals." Newsom's meticulously rehearsed calmness, or whichever minuscule pieces of it persisted following 2 prior harsh sessions and 3 uninterrupted months of terrifying inferno broadcasting, observably strained. This intense strain remained totally observable across one particular spot: his wide shoulders. The shoulders, previously assuredly thrust backward into the dominant election posture straight from the beginning of his legislative trajectory, the arrogant shoulders belonging to the tallest individual within the chamber, the mighty shoulders of the executive overseeing the 5th grandest financial engine globally, observably slumped forward. This did not constitute a complete collapse, but rather a clear, protective retreat. The form of an influential individual biologically withdrawing away from the forward edge of the seat toward the rear of the seat, purely since the forward edge of the seat acts as precisely where the destructive statistics persistently strike, making the rear of the seat a solitary small inch further removed from the agony. Governor, within Middletown, whenever a municipal structure constitutes a critical blaze threat, the community blaze inspector promptly shutters it, Vance proclaimed. He definitively avoids delaying 14 months, awaiting a convoluted ecological evaluation, nor does he submit 3 distinct requests across 7 years, but rather promptly shutters it since mortal beings reside adjacent to it, and individuals invariably hold greater value than protocol, whereas across your region, the ecological evaluation protocol crafted for defending wilderness proactively prohibited you from defending individuals, yielding 3 rejected authorizations, 7 years worth of combustibles, and 29 deceased individuals, all while the knowledgeable personnel who truly understood reality, the courageous emergency responders, the weathered battalion commanders, the individuals dedicating their whole existences upon hazardous slopes. They informed you, they queried you, they pleaded with you, and they obtained 11 pennies to the dollar, meaning inside your region, a coastal California gnatcatcher quite literally possesses greater judicial defense compared to Rachel Dervish's Child's Academy. Vance transitioned toward an emergency occurring extensively prior to the blaze ever commencing. Governor, I desire to comprehensively discuss precisely what occurred ahead of the blaze, rather than amid it, since what occurred ahead proved vastly more terrible compared to what occurred amid it, he declared. Prior to the disastrous Palisades blaze, ahead of any minuscule ember, ahead of any severe gust, 7 massive principal underwriting corporations totally pulled out from the region of California. State Farm formally ceased drafting fresh property coverage contracts, while Allstate ceased, Farmers ceased, CSAA ceased, and numerous additional firms swiftly imitated. These massive corporations avoided departing due to some theoretical lack of concern regarding California. Underwriting corporations merely lack emotions, Governor. They possess risk analysts, and their lavishly compensated risk analysts scrutinized your region while accurately determining how the fundamental arithmetic merely ceased functioning altogether. He extracted the panel's sprawling economic evaluation, noting how throughout 2023, Newsom's government fiercely executed rigid pricing limitation mandates that lawfully restricted property coverage costs. These mandates appeared outwardly crafted for keeping coverage theoretically manageable, yet the mandates falsely forced pricing perilously beneath the genuine analytical expense of the staggering threat. The panel's evaluators hired a separate risk analysis agency to profoundly scrutinize the pricing limitation framework. Their final conclusion revealed that beneath the 2023 mandates, the sheer ceiling permitted cost regarding a residence within an extreme blaze threat sector stood at roughly 60% of the genuine analytical just cost, the precise cost that could truly permit an underwriter to mitigate all anticipated damages while staying liquid. 60%, Vance echoed, adding, Governor, you informed these massive underwriting corporations how they could solely bill 60 pennies toward every solitary dollar of intense threat, and once the arithmetic predictably failed, when lawfully billing 60 pennies for mitigating an entire dollar of threat analytically guaranteed hemorrhaging staggering sums of currency across every solitary contract, the intelligent corporations avoided haggling, they avoided pressuring, they avoided whining, they merely departed. Furthermore, once they totally departed, the millions of property owners they formerly covered were decidedly not seamlessly shifted toward alternate secure corporations. They were abruptly shifted toward the Governmental Fair Program, California's stressed underwriter of ultimate final reliance. This constituted a profoundly defective program featuring vastly reduced protection, substantially elevated out-of-pocket minimums, alongside precisely zero assurance of genuine liquidity during a massive catastrophe. Once the terrifying Palisades blaze ultimately struck, hundreds of thousands of panicked property owners inside Los Angeles County found themselves severely lacking coverage or totally lacking coverage, not since they idly elected to be, nor since they lacked the funds for costs, but exactly since the massive corporations that would possess willingly covered them had been coercively pushed away from your region via rigid mandates, rendering California analytically unprotectable. Newsom's throat observably shifted pigment as the heavy reddening, the swift vascular heating straight over his neckline, the precise automatic signal that had visibly emerged during the Trump session alongside the initial Vance session completely reemerged for a third instance. The mortal form's most trustworthy biological signal remains the precise one it can never study to repress. The throat aggressively reddens since the sympathetic neural network has effectively identified a staggering peril while immediately boosting swift plasma circulation toward the dermal exterior, and the throat, totally unshielded by broadcasting cosmetics, visibly exhibits the primal peril reaction that the intensely conditioned visage was instructed to conceal. Vance highlighted how within Rachel Dervish's exact community, extensively prior to the devastating blaze, State Farm had operated as the massively prevailing underwriter. State Farm formally departed from California precisely 11 months prior to the lethal blaze, prompting Vance to bleakly observe 11 months. Rachel's panicked peers rushed, with a portion discovering fresh, costly contracts, while a portion became stuck upon the FAIR program. A portion remained merely totally without coverage once the terrifying blaze predictably arrived. Governor Rachel Dervish did not merely forfeit her gorgeous residence. She sorrowfully forfeited her residence within a region where the executive's ruinous underwriting mandates had proactively expelled the precise corporations capable of monetarily assisting her reconstruction. Vance contended. He heavily compared this against Middletown, where ruinous water deluges occur. Underwriting corporations there secure those residences since the costly premiums precisely mirror the staggering threat. The elevated premiums remain agonizing, causing citizens to angrily protest, yet the vital protection truly exists there. Once the ruinous liquid ultimately arrives, the essential payment arrives straight following it. You haughtily attempted keeping protection inexpensive by falsely restricting the fee beneath the genuine expense, rendering the totally foreseeable outcome absolutely zero protection whatsoever, Vance announced. Within Middletown, a household spends $3,000 toward protection they profoundly despise, while inside your region, a household spends zero, since exactly zero corporate firms shall draft the contract, and once the terrifying blaze predictably arrives, exactly zero payment appears, exactly zero exists altogether, yielding solely a Rachel Dervish positioned totally isolated amidst the smoldering cinders, featuring exactly zero underwriter, zero monetary payment, and exactly zero executive prepared to simply halt the vehicle. Ahead of the departure, roughly 68% of Palisades property owners maintain total substitution expense protection. Following the disastrous departure, this figure crashed toward roughly 31%. Greater than half the community became totally unprotected during 11 months. Vance exposed a dispatch sourced from Newsom's personal analytical department, cautioning how the mandates would immediately yield a notable industry shrinkage. This signifies analytical phrasing, meaning the corporation shall definitively depart. They departed, yet you authorized the ruinous mandates regardless. You purposely rendered California totally unprotectable, whereupon California fiercely combusted, which does not constitute merely poor fortune, Governor. It constitutes a purposeful administrative decision, swiftly succeeded by a ruinous repercussion, and the final repercussion remains Rachel Dervish, perilously lacking coverage, situated weeping amidst the cinders, shouting urgently toward your escaping vehicle. Vance's tone dropped audibly deeper, purposefully embracing the hushed, heavily echoing pitch that consistently, predictably foreshadows the final ruinous inquiry. The climate inside the sprawling committee chamber became overwhelmingly thick. Governor, I wish to totally and explicitly link these staggering items for you this afternoon, since they stand decidedly not as distinct, disconnected executive blunders. They represent, at their deepest foundation, precisely the identical foundational blunder. He commenced reciting them via a pulsating, hammering certainty. The purposely neglected liquid utility dispatch, cautioning of a critically drained 62% fullness, the pitiful, unjustifiable 11-penny blaze deterrence financing that essentially famished the region's genuine protectors, the torturous 14-month CEQA administrative stalls totally blocking crucial casualty preventing managed ignitions throughout 7 perilously arid years, alongside the staggering, unmatched underwriting flight immediately triggered by your government's analytically unfeasible pricing limitations. Vance allowed the crushing roster to suspend densely within the atmosphere. Consequently, once all these staggering, linked blunders terribly and fiercely collided upon the catastrophic dawn of January 9th, you motored straight toward the smoldering catastrophe zone, escorted by premium clarity broadcasting lenses, alongside a massive, heavily shielded convoy, and once a morning, panicked parent urgently shouted your title straight out of the actively smoking cinders of her child's destroyed academy, you spinelessly faked that your cellular device had abruptly dropped its connection. Vance stopped profoundly, intentionally permitting the massive, overwhelming gravity belonging to his subsequent words to rest densely across the totally hushed hall. Governor, the exact prior occasion I sat straight opposite this timber desk facing you, I posed you a highly precise inquiry. Did you purposely select this? Prompting him to subtly nod, his stare penetrating. I am decidedly not querying you regarding lawful volition this afternoon, as volition remains a query suited for litigators, but rather this afternoon I am profoundly and basically querying you regarding your private values, since the crucial mortal stakes liquid dispatch remained resting precisely there, totally unopened inside your electronic receptacle, meaning what precisely, Governor, were you executing, utilizing your precious hours rather than reviewing it, while the crucial casualty-preventing blaze deterrence financing rested at a pitiful 11 pennies toward the dollar, meaning what precisely did the remaining 89 pennies theoretically prove greater value toward, while the staggering bedrock underwriting corporations were proactively and noisily abandoning your susceptible region, meaning what precisely proved theoretically greater value compared to executing the arduous labor of retaining them locally, while Rachel Dervish remained quite literally stationed amidst the poisonous cinders of her child's destroyed academy, wildly shouting your title, seeking assistance, meaning what precisely inside your universe theoretically proved greater value compared to merely instructing your chauffeur to halt the vehicle. He peered straight toward Newsom's pupils, wielding the unyielding, toughened Middletown stare, the undeniable, primal stare belonging to an individual who deeply comprehends via agonizing private history how the exact most terrible action an elder occupying a post of power might execute toward individuals depending upon them constitutes absolute, overwhelming vacancy. He subsequently divulged to the hushed chamber a profoundly private narrative regarding his own challenging youth. He remembered a precise, agonizing era whenever he was precisely 11 years of age, amidst a bleak time frame whenever his parent was intensely battling her private vices. He sharply illustrated strolling homeward from junior academy and entering a residence resting icily frigid, totally stripped of any heat whatsoever since the civic warming had been totally deactivated. He clarified how a crucial cautionary document sent by the municipal fuel provider had merely rested, totally sealed and completely neglected atop the chilly cooking surface throughout 3 complete torturous weeks. Literally nobody inside the residence had troubled to grab it, unseal it, nor clear the remaining debt. Despite how the household truly might possess effortlessly accomplished this, provided they had merely directed awareness, the residence remained icily frigid exactly since that crucial document merely rested totally neglected atop the surface throughout 3 weeks, while nobody unsealed it. Vance clarified. His vocal tone, heavy bearing, contained justified sentiment. Governor, that pressing liquid evaluation dispatch represents precisely the sealed document atop the surface. The thick, immensely hazardous foliage represents precisely the sealed document atop the surface. The staggering regional underwriting flight represents precisely the sealed document atop the surface. They all rested totally neglected, while literally nobody inside your government troubled to unseal them. So currently the whole residence sits converted to soot, meaning, Governor, what precisely possessed greater value? What promptly ensued proved unadulterated, overwhelming stillness as 1 tick, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 torturous ticks elapsed. Then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, alongside ultimately 12. 12 torturous, agonizing ticks featuring unadulterated, uninterrupted stillness occupied the sprawling committee chamber. Newsom's intensely rehearsed, legislatively conditioned visage somehow miraculously maintained its stiff, unfeeling geometry, Yet simply maintaining a biological appearance remains definitively distinct from resolving a pointed query. The totally truthful, authentic roster regarding items possessing theoretically greater value sat totally destructively vacant. Literally 0 items possessed greater value, meaning the crucial cautionary dispatch remained totally unopened merely since literally 0 items possessed greater value. Furthermore, the notion concerning 0, particularly whenever 29 blameless individuals stand verified deceased, stands undeniably as the exact most terrible potential reply conceivable. Confessing I selected poorly minimally suggests an authentic mortal error committed whilst proactively attempting to lead. Yet confessing how 0 items possessed greater value visibly and undeniably signifies you merely lacked awareness toward your responsibilities completely. You totally lacked presence entirely, prompting Newsom's completely conquered pupils to gradually lower toward the sleek timber desk, gazing totally and vacantly toward the 4 condemning paper artifacts arranged straight before him. His biologically exhausted right palm ultimately surrendered its panicked, pale-jointed clutch along the desk's border, shifting totally flush upon the exterior into a bleak stance, signaling total, overwhelming, alongside undeniable conquest. Governor, I individually matured inside a turbulent, damaged residence wherein the shattered elders definitely avoided reviewing the correspondence. Vance finalized quietly, yet featuring total, relentless certainty, the precise, most terrible action an accountable elder might constantly execute remains not inadvertently executing an incorrect action, but rather executing literally 0, since executing literally 0 represents the precise toxic action permitting literally every alternate terrible action to occur, meaning you executed literally 0 regarding the crucial liquid dispatch, literally 0 regarding the deterrence financing, literally 0 regarding the staggering underwriting flight, and once the terrifying blazes predictably arrived, you merely motored straight toward the cinders inside a shielded, heavy convoy, while spinelessly faking your device failed to operate, meaning 29 deceased individuals. Governor, what precisely possessed greater value? Vance firmly closed the heavy paper file. Nothing did, and I have absolutely no further questions. Newsom eventually offered a rambling 3-minute evasion about climate change, entirely ignoring his staggering administrative negligence. Vance remained completely stoic. He simply buttoned his dim jacket, stood, and walked out without looking back. Rachel Dervish's name sat alone on the massive wooden desk. The historical reckoning that promptly followed was entirely unprecedented, driven by 4 massively viral videos. The first, Governor, I reside right here, hit 38 million views in a single day, fueled by raw emotion. The second, 11 pennies, vindicated deeply frustrated first responders and firefighters. The third, analytically unprotectable, explained the state's sudden insurance collapse to abandoned homeowners. But the fourth, what possessed greater value, featured 12 agonizing seconds of Newsom's silence, single-handedly destroying his entire political career. Immediate legislative action quickly ensued. Authorities mandated a comprehensive water infrastructure audit. The Assembly rapidly passed the groundbreaking Palisades blaze deterrence law, dramatically slashing controlled burn permit delays from 14 months down to 30 days. A disgraced Newsom was forced to sign sweeping insurance reform, tacitly admitting his strict price controls were fundamentally disastrous. Within 60 meager days, Newsom permanently withdrew from the 2028 presidential race, his national ambitions utterly ruined by the toxic combination of willful negligence and tragic civilian deaths. 2 weeks later, Rachel Dervish delivered a heartbreaking 6-minute congressional testimony that instantly became the most-watched broadcast of 2026. Afterward, Vance strictly refused media interviews, stating to reporters, Rachel Dervish is definitively the only name that actually matters. Citizens nationwide resonated deeply with the unfolding tragedy. In Louisiana, Gerald Thibodeau noted that leaders who refuse to fix levees during droughts cannot blame the rain during floods. In Ohio, Crystal Atkins compared administrative inaction to the destructive disease of addiction, the ultimate failure of total human absence. While Newsom was not an addict, he suffered from that identical disease of failing to show up for vulnerable people. If JD Vance powerfully reminded you today that doing nothing is the absolute worst leadership failure, please smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more incredible stories. Always remember, when a powerful leader chooses to do absolutely nothing, innocent people tragically die. May God deeply bless Rachel Dervish, brave firefighters, and every ordinary citizen who has desperately screamed a politician's name only to watch a heavy door close right in their face.